My guest today is Carlo van der Veer, who is coming to us from the Netherlands. Carlo has an incredible background in mechanical engineering. He's worked in the automotive industry. He's been with companies like Siemens and TomTom. He is the managing director of the Eindhoven AI Institute, AI System Institute at Eindhoven University of Technology. He's a tremendous expert on this thing you may have heard of called artificial intelligence. And so today we want to explore his thoughts, his perspectives on this transformative exponential technology, its impact on our lives, on our industries, our organizations, and our future. Carlo, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So, Carlo, I wanted to explore a variety of facets of the diamond. There's so many different aspects of this transformational technology, and people like you have, and this is sort of part of the Singularity University ethos. We've all been talking about this artificial intelligence thing for quite some time now. Now it is a little bit of just sort of a basket of technologies. There's no thing you can touch that's actually artificial intelligence. But I did want to sort of see what that arc has been in your life and in your career, and then talk about some of the possible futures with this exponential technology and how it can affect us and some of the ways that we can try to build a more positive future. So take me back to when Carlo was a child. What were some of your early fascinations?
Oh, that's one. My big hobby is music. It still is, but that didn't really turn out to to be a big career. The other thing is that I always played with technology. When Lego came with the technical Lego, that's an important point. So I think I owe it to the Danish that I grew into technology. So that's probably somewhere where it started, and my interest was raised. And then at a certain moment, I wanted to be a doctor, but I was too impatient, I think, to be a house doctor. So I shifted that to my sister. She's much better than that. And I started studying technology. Yeah, so and don't regret it, because I really think, and we will come back to that one, that technology is the main thing that has to save our future. And so I'm glad I landed there.
And so tell us a little bit about the ways that launched you into your career and you work. You did a lot of work in the transportation industry. You were working with companies like TomTom, which was one of the sort of precursors to things like Google Maps. What was that arc for you?
Yeah, the thing that I indeed always worked in the automotive industry. Also, I like to be mobile. I like any form of transport, be it on a bike, on a boat, on a train, or a plane, but whatever. I like to get around. That's another thing, I think. But for some reason, I also like to work in this very, very dynamic industry where the margins are very thin and it's very sharp on the edge, innovation constantly. And also, mobility is a real industry a real example of an industry that's also in the midst of this disruption continuously. So there's never a boring moment. So yeah, I worked in the automotive industry, and it's about 15 years ago when the University of Eindhoven asked me to come and join them to also coordinate all the mobility research. And actually, since then, I got a little bit of broader perspective. I was working at TomTom, and I thought, let's help these people at the university for 1 or 2 years. And that's 15 years ago. So I never want to not work at a university again. So and 7 years ago, they asked me also to set up this AI Institute, which, well, there's quite a bit of overlap between mobility and AI, but yeah, that's actually my main activity now.
So why is mobility sort of a good test case for AI innovation? What is that intersection?
The thing is that there's just a huge calculation power of cars, which is often underestimated. There are huge computers on wheels. If you also see, there's about 100 million lines of software code in an average vehicle nowadays. And I talked to a Mercedes engineer once, and he said, yeah, 80% of the software, I haven't got a clue what it does there, but we just leave it there. Don't know if that's really true, but it's an enormous complex machine. And as I said, with very low margins, so you always have to be creative how to make it cheaper. And all this innovation also started producing data. So actually, these data producing kind of computers on wheels Yeah, they are in the forefront of a lot of this intelligence, what is happening. And it's a big societal thing as well, where a lot of accidents happens and a lot of pollution happens. So there's a lot of things to improve the mobility as well. So you have the technology possibilities and you have to need to improve. And that's why mobility is very, very often put forward as an example of how AI should improve that.
So when we talk about artificial intelligence and this sort of basket of technologies, you've got a new student that is approaching this arena. How do you explain to them, think about this basket of technologies and what goes into it? It's we obviously ChatGPT 3.5 was this inflection point for so many people to try to understand, well, oh, wait a minute, that's one use case for it, large language models and generative AI. But Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis, we've been talking about since the beginning of SU and even before about potential for artificial intelligence, for machine learning, and those algorithms to go through the hockey stick curve of exponentials. And now here today we are. But how do you explain that to somebody that's coming new into the arena?
Yeah, what I often have to explain is what AI is exactly about, because there's a lot of misunderstanding as well. A lot of people talk about AI and they actually mean it's just the next level of automation in a lot of cases. The specific difference between an AI is that it's actually a goal-oriented adaptive behavior, which is the official most used definition of intelligence itself. But when machines start doing that they have a goal and they adapt their behavior in order to achieve a goal. That's something that used to be only human. So the classical machine was just, you had a machine, you put a program on it, and then you gave it an input and an output came out. That's a classical automation. Now you have a machine and you give it an input, but you also give it an output and you leave it to the machine to do the program. And it will self-adapt. So the program will deliver an output, and when it differs from the output that comes in, it will adapt itself in order to achieve this output. And that leads to machines that we do not exactly know how they come to a certain result, but it makes actually the program itself. And that's a little bit a scary thing. And that's also what makes these AI machines look like how we as humans behave. And that's an enormous new amount of technology that by many is underestimated.
So how do you think about some of the different threads that the technology is following? I mean, one of the things that people often miss is, well, you've probably been using a lot of these algorithms that are sort of in that basket, goal-driven, adaptive behavior, everything from Google searches to, sort of baked into your productivity applications. You've been using these algorithms for quite some time, but people tend to think a lot about chatbots nowadays and that sort of thing because it's just this big leap forward in their minds. So do you have sort of bins of the technology that you point to so that people can understand just what the different use cases are?
Yeah, what used to be the self-driving car was always the example, because driving is something that is really very close to what we are doing, and it's also one of the big overlaps between mobility and AI, of course. But that's one of the examples where you also can very clearly say where this self-thinking machine could go wrong. If you say, I want to go home as fast as possible, and then the car concludes that the quickest way is over through a play yard full of children, that's not the answer that we want from this kind of machines. So we have to already give it a certain limits to what it's allowed to do. And just giving it the traffic limits is also not 100% the solution, because if you 100% stick to the rules in traffic, you probably also will end up with some kind of deadlock situation. We tend to flexibly interpret the rules in order to survive traffic. And these cars should also be learned how to do that. So most of these aspects of the good and the bad that AI can do are easily explainable with these self-driving machines. But there are more examples of, for instance, the humanoid robots. Ever since Boston started doing that. Yeah. So, they kind of were the first one that also confronted us. What if these humanoid robots, these human-like robots, start involving with our business? Do we have feelings for these robots? All these kind of things, and these things you can also really actually project on these machines. So Boston Dynamics did it, but now you have an explosion of the amount of humanoids, and it's coming so quick that we have to think how we're going to relate with these machines. should also be done quite quick, because it's coming quicker than regulation can follow. And that's another difficult point that we have to discuss with all these technology students.
So you pointed to a number of fascinating dynamics to me. The first is that we talk about these algorithms, but in many cases, it's that exponential, but it's paired with other exponentials. So an autonomous car, for instance, you have to have LiDAR. You've got to be able to have some type of communications capacity. You've got there's all these other technologies that are part of that basket. And it's the same thing with a robot. If you just have this animate object, but it can't use these algorithms to be able to make decisions in the physical world, then it's like a self-driving car that can't go anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. And there are several technologies at this moment actually leveraging each other, etc., so that we come to this perfect storm. One other important one that's also being developed exponentially at this moment is, for instance, the number of sensors. If you look what a camera used to cost and how cheap little cameras we now have, it's not only that one. If you look again for a car, the number of sensors in a car, the data it's producing, is exploding. And if you then look at a traditional system law that says, if you just look at the system, it is something that you give an assignment, it does something, and then you have a sensor to see what it does. And if that actually is somehow related to what you given as an assignment, it will steer itself and it will serve a certain actuator. And you keep on, as a cyber physical system is constantly seeing what it's doing. That's two important ones. That's the actuator on the one side, and that's the sensor on the other side that controls what you're doing. Now, the quality of both is at this moment improving, but that of actuators is kind of a linear improvement. Everything, our electric motors and all the kind of stuff gets better and better, but that's kind of a linear thing. Sensors are exploding exponentially at this moment. And that makes it so much better to have also, with this exponential growth in machine learning and with calculation power, that's such a good combination to make systems better. Because to make a system better, the centering is much more important than the actuation. For instance, if your steer is not 100% doing what you want it to do because the actuator is not that good, then if you see that, you can always correct, or with your brakes or by steering, etc. If your sensors are not good, so if you close your eyes and try to drive, you can have very good actuators, but you're going to have an accident sooner or later. So the fact that this is also going for even for organizations. Make sure that the data you get to steer your organization, what moves people, how people are performing, etc. So the input of that is much better than how that you control your company, etc. As long as you see what's happening, get the sensors right. So this access to sensors, very important for any smart system. But the good thing is that sensors are also at this moment exponentially improving.
So I think that's a great analogy, because organizational decision makers, people in government, got to have the information. So you have to have the sensors. You have to have the algorithms. That is, you have to be able to process it and be able to understand how you make decisions. And then you've got to take action. And it's this constant cycle. And you've got examples with autonomous cars, where all those pieces have to work in concert. And if one of them isn't working well, then the car either doesn't go anywhere or it's going to run into a wall.
Yeah, and as long as you know that that's happening, you can use either that actuator or another actuator in order to take action. And for companies, the change with it used to be is that the actuator, say the tough boss or whatever that could really steer and make clear assignments, that was very important in the old school. So, but if you see, I see this really moving now, also with a bit of experience in trying to steer companies. You see actually that you don't need the tough, very clear decision-making guy or girl or whoever. You need actually the one that has the good information, that can listen to the information and really sees what's going on. That's much more important than being very directive, etc. That's really a change that you see, and this is going to be more important with AI coming in.
So I want to talk a little bit about the pace that you were mentioning, the speed, because I think maybe Ray Kurzweil would have said that he anticipated this inflection point, but most people would say that the pace and the scale of the development of these technologies and their adoption and the continuous process of innovation is moving at blinding speed. Normally, I would say, well, let's start to talk about possible futures and let's look way down the road, 20, 30 years, even 2 or 3 years down the road,
Yeah.
the fog is still pretty thick, right? Because it's moving so quickly. So how do you think about the impact and the opportunity on our lives and our organizations, even in just a 2 to 3 year time frame? What are some of the major elements you think we need to be tracking on because the pace is moving so rapidly? And what are some of the ways that decision makers should start to think about how they can get their arms around these technologies to be able to leverage them and to get the best advantage from them?
Yeah, that's an important question, and indeed, some things move much faster than we think, and the other ones don't come by far as fast as we hoped them to come. Often because it's a solution looking for a problem. There are lot of technology developments that actually do not really solve a problem, and that's also often forgotten. But yeah, there are some things changing that you should embrace, mainly actually for decision makers, because what you now see is that all this technology not only improves your productivity, which they love, obviously, but the other thing is also that it can also improve the quality of your organization, and it's both things. So it's this somewhat cliche saying is that this AI is not going to replace people, which I really do not 100% think, but the people that work with AI will be placing the people that do not work with AI, because you're going to lose on both productivity and quality. The thing is why every now and then we are very proud to see AI making mistakes, because it still does making mistakes. And we are so impressed that we give it a little bit too much credit and do not check what it makes. But what you see now happening at this moment in this productivity, especially also with this large language models, it's something that I also see a parallel with the work of my wife, who is a teacher in Dutch. So she's at school. And 1.5 years ago, when this ChatGPT came up, she's all of a sudden saw the most stupid pupils came up with the most fantastic essays. So that's she's like, whoa, what's happening here, you know? And they were smart enough at a certain moment to also hide some language errors just to try to fool her, but she got it going. So, and we had a bit of a discussion then, because she said, okay, well, what is this? My pupils probably in due course will not know how to write a decent essay if they leave it to ChatGPT. We should forbid that. I said, yeah, but that is good for all of my students. They have an internship, and they have for 9 months or something, and they have to use 2 months to write a report. Now with ChatGPT, they make that 2 weeks. So they have 1.5 months more to do research, where they have much more added value. So embrace it. So we didn't really immediately agree on that point, where we normally agreed immediately on everything, you know. But anyway, what you see already changing in her office, in her teachership, is that they're now starting to embrace it, because you see that the intelligence is moving to the prompt, you know, the question that you ask GPT, and you will recognize that you asked it something and it comes back with something. Oh no, that's not what I mean. And you give some edit, and please say a little bit more about that and that and that, etc. That the sermon, there's more information in the prompt, and it's longer prompt than that the essay will be. But that's where your intelligence at this moment is. And now they say, okay, use ChatGPT, but share the prompt with me, and also check what it is and agree with what you see, so that it's your piece again. And this is a kind of cooperation that also decision makers will have to work towards. So embrace the technology, use it as also a sparring partner to get your thoughts running. And this goes like that. Be careful, because you can really make stupid mistakes. You can upload your entire software code to ChatGPT so that Microsoft can also read with it. Think about this kind of stuff. But then try to stimulate the use of it, because it will make you much more productive.
Absolutely. I mean, you know that it's my focus with Singularity as a fellow for transformation. I focus a lot on issues like the future of work and the future of learning. And when it comes to the future of learning, I mean, we definitely have the opportunity to treat this as the inflection point where we can question, well, maybe what we were doing was not exactly the right thing in education, like teaching to the test and that sort of thing. Maybe we really should be just teaching them to think, and they can be using these tools to help them with the thinking process. Now, when it comes to the work environment, yes, there is always an opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity to leverage the tools, but people still do freak out
Yeah.
about the potential for worker replacement. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, has very famously said that you're going to be hiring AI employees. Mark Benioff has said that he's never going to hire another programmer because they're all going to be AI programmers. And so these there's underlying issues of concerns about job replacement and trust that even these technologies, we rely on them. Do you really want an AI co-worker that has still these potential flaws in the technology? So how do you help decision makers and organizations to be thinking about the potential for job displacement? And how do you think about, you talked about the relationship with robots, but the people are exploring, well, what do we mean by the relationship with these AI technologies in our everyday lives and our work?
Yeah. Yeah, if you play around with all these tools, and it's what, especially last couple of months, I'm doing more and more because there's so much tooling coming up so fast at this moment to make your PowerPoints, to make pictures, to make small movies, to everything. So there's so much to do, the deep research, etc. I'm playing around a lot with them, and then you get already a sense on how you have this relation, because I do thank my ChatGPT outcome or whatever all nicely. I always say please as well. I do feel kind of a relation. That's, by the way, anyhow, good to do, because they're going to remember you in 10, 20 years from now. This guy said please, so we'll keep him alive. I don't know. You never know. But anyhow, I do sense a kind of relation already with this problem solver that I every now and then use. And I guess this is something that's anyhow coming our way at this moment. But if you look at the job replacement, this isn't something new. We always had machines to replace our jobs, and it always came with kind of a bit of friction. The Luddites who attacked the weaving machines in Manchester 200 years ago because they didn't want them to take their jobs. They had some other concerns that and they might have a point at some point, that it make the richer, etc. But nobody in Manchester now wants to go back to the hand weaving. Let's agree on that one. And I think that at least for the next years to come, maybe decades to come, what I see is very similar to what automation already did for us. It's that it taking away quite a bit of the nasty jobs, and some even nastier jobs came maybe for that because of automation. We have a lot of these order pickers and always these nastier jobs because of the internet came up, but it's especially there where we can also do a lot of automation. And I tend to make a distinction to all the jobs that are just simply applying rules, which, for instance, a translator also does. He just has to translate a piece into another language. That's just following standard language rules. And sorry, that's not really where we as humans in the future will add value. So all the coloring inside the lines, the following the written rules, etc., please leave that to the machines. In most cases, we're talking about a job where there's an enormous shortage. So let's not complain too much. But when you say programmers, 10 years ago, everybody said here, well, no, we need more programmers. That's the job of the future. We should teach our children how to program. Now that's programming is just simply applying rules. So that's something that you now see very quickly being taken over. And I'm not so worried about that one. We always found new jobs. And although it comes very fast and a little bit on unexpected areas, content production, all this kind of stuff, the thing is, to my point of view, is just a next step in moving up in Maslow's pyramid, where we come to the somewhat vaguest jobs. I always make the difference, the comparison with a farmer 200 years ago when we all were farmers. Would you have told the farmer back then that now only 1 or 2% of us is farmers and they make 10 times better and much more food than they did? They would have concluded that either they don't have to work anymore for the food, or we all work 1 hour, etc., and we get the food done. And then explain to a farmer 200 years ago what kind of jobs we are doing now. That there's yoga teachers and development coaches and account managers and all this kind of stuff. That's not explainable to people in front, because they were just on the bottom of Maslow's pyramid making food. That's the essence. That we are just moving up Maslow's pyramid, and we can make an enormous step extra now that AI is a next phase to push innovation to make us even more productive. And that's the important thing. We have to be more productive, because productive linearly relates to our prosperity. And if we want to be more prosperous, and it's not so much you and I maybe, but we want to get the entire world more prosperous than it used to be, then we need more productivity, and we need this kind of technology to make the next step.
So help us think a little bit about some of the jobs, even in just a couple of years, right? So yes, there's a big shift in programming, for instance.
Yeah.
Where do you think some of you, and you've said as well that a lot of the jobs where coloring in the lines, those are going to be automated. There's a lot of activity, especially that focuses on human creativity, that's coloring outside of the lines, like graphic artists and photographers and even journalists. And we're seeing it still impact on their work. So
Oh
for
yeah.
instance, on the platform, the gig work platform Upwork, there was a drop off of 40% of
Yeah.
freelance writers, for instance, in just a few months after ChatGPT 3.5 was released. So
Yeah.
help us to understand where some of those future, even near future jobs might be about that are coloring outside the lines where you don't think that technology is going to have tremendous impact in the near term.
Yeah, true. So I do not fully agree that the jobs that you just mentioned is about coloring outside the line. So making a good
Okay.
picture of someone, etc., and writing text is actually just applying ideas into text.
Okay.
They actually got the ideas from people and then made the text about it. So now these people that got the ideas, that's the coloring outside the lines, they make then text themselves. So yeah. But with this kind of interviews, and I know you're good at this, you're also challenging me in order to make the next thought, which I normally not think about. That's exactly what you're doing here, where you add the value. This would not be a good interview if I would talk to an AI agent, probably. Although you see now also two AIs talking to each other and coming up with some interesting ideas. But that's still far from what we're doing here. The first call I want to make on the future jobs is that a lot of people think that most jobs are behind desks, which is not the case. By far, most of the jobs are deskless. And that's a call I first want to make, that a lot of blue collar jobs, yes, there are quite a bit that we can replace probably as well over there. Not the best ones. As I said, the pick and place and work in a big distribution center and all kind of stuff. But say the real craftsmanships, the masteries, the guys that make the timber, the work, the plumber, all this kind of stuff. We have an enormous shortage now, and there's going to be an enormous more shortage in the future. Why is that? We had plumbers, but we always teach the son of the plumber, you become a programmer, then you can make more money. That was go study that you don't have to be a plumber like daddy. That's stupid. We pay them, we should pay them, or they will be paid more in the future, because in the old days, we had one toilet and maybe and not even a bathtub, in houses. Now every house has, and we had families of 7, now we have families of 1.5, and they have 2 baths and 3 toilets and all this kind of stuff. So we need about 10 times more plumbers, but we have less of them. And us becoming richer, it's exactly these kind of deskless jobs that's for sure going to be safe, going to be much more rewarded, and rightfully. So that's one category that I first want to think. We even have to enhance their jobs. That's why we need probably the humanoids to assist them, etc. That's one thing. On the other thing, telling what kind of jobs it is, it's like asking a farmer 200 years ago what we're doing in the future, and trying to predict that we need television producers, etc. That's a bit hard to do. So I want to first cover myself on that one. Where you have to look for it, it's a little bit a dirty word. It's a little bit the experience jobs, because whenever you see that actually automation comes in and makes stuff very cheap, that everything is moving to experience. My favorite example is the music industry, where I spend a lot of music on CDs and LPs, and actually my children have that all for free, and me as well now. But now you see a massive amount of concerts and festivals. So the stuff gets free and people move in the same industry to the experience. And that's what happened actually in all industries, that we are moving to the experience. And if you can add experience, it's a strange world. Look at all the lines that are on the top of Maslow's pyramid about self-employment and and the feeling of accomplishment, this kind of stuff. And there's a lot in the leisure and the tourism and the sports and all this kind of stuff, where a lot of new jobs will occur that we now think are BS jobs, to say it nicely. But that's the same how a farmer probably thinks about most of the jobs today.
Just to accentuate your point, in the United States, at one point, about 70% of all the economic value came from agriculture, and today it's about 3%. And about 60% of the jobs today don't really have much of an information component. So we talked about the work roles. What about the industries? Some of the dynamics that you were talking about sort of doing the repetitive use of information, that sort of thing. You look at the legal industry, which I do talks to all the time. And what is the process of interpreting laws? Well, it's a whole bunch of information that humans wrote. It's pretty easy to put all that into some repository and then to ask an LLM to give you input as to what your potential exposure is or how a law might work for your organization. So what are the industries that you think are most able to take advantage nowadays of these tools? Are there, wouldn't call them canaries in the coal mine, but the ones that are best optimized to be able to leverage these tools?
Yeah, it's nice that you begin with the legal stuff, because that's that's always under discussion, how to interpret the laws. Because if you want to every occurrence that can happen that needs a lawyer or somebody of some legal assistance, that's not being found in the book of law. Otherwise, the book of law would be as big as a country, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
So you always have an interpretation of the very limited book of law, and that's maybe you, but the preparation of such a case, that's of course now being done by an intern or a colleague or a clerk, and
Yeah.
that's something where they will be able to really have a big of support. So I talked to a legal advisor. He said, yeah, that's what we've been hearing for 10 years ago. It was actually predicted that there would be self-driving cars and we don't need so much lawyers. And now every day I'm in a traffic jam with my car because I have to get to work because we can't find enough lawyers to do all the work. So I said, yeah. But you also have to admit that it is at this moment changing a little bit. But the other thing is that also the people that do the claims towards the legal advisors, they come up with letters, thanks to ChatGPT, that they also use it as a stick to be confronting the lawyers. So the people on the other side of the table are also more clever, so they have to put extra effort on top of it. But having said that, there are a lot of industries where AI will also really be applied and also is very necessary. One of which is, of course, the transportation. We talked about the self-driving car, but actually my background is also, I worked on that 20 years ago, that we as TomTom were making, and still TomTom is still making, but they're doing this more white label, so you don't see it, but they're making traffic information. And traffic information is really something where you have to apply AI, that you have all this sensoring, all these cars driving around know exactly what speed is being driven where, but then you have to kind of redistribute the traffic in a sensible way without causing new traffic jams. That was already top level intelligence that we had to apply there. And this can be actually brought to a higher level, that you know where are the people and where do they want to be, and try to predict where the conflicts will arise, and then organize the entire mobility in a much more sensible way. That's one of the most interesting applications of AI in mobility. So that's the one. And then we have the autonomous vehicles. Although what I rather say is that all this technology that we need, I'm not a firm believer in robo taxis. From my point of view, it's a solution looking for a real problem. There are some minor problems, but it will not replace the total car ownership. But cars making accidents is a huge problem. We should fix that. And we don't need a robo-taxi for that. There's enough technology that can also be of assistance to prevent that you and I have accidents while driving. That's the second artificial intelligence. The third is a very interesting one, and also a bridge to energy, is that all these electric cars they have a huge amount of assets with their battery that can also help the entire grid to actually support it instead of overload it, what everybody thinks that these cars will do. So if these cars also can supply energy and charge energy and start trading with energy, you have this massive amount with a lot of clients and suppliers that is so difficult to steer that we need AI in order to make the maximum benefit of that. So these are just some things where we will see an enormous amount of AI helping these industries.
So you have a deep understanding of these technologies and how they're developed and the companies that are developing that sort of thing. What do you worry about? There's obviously tons of worries that people talk about
Yeah.
and that are in the press all the time. things like artificial general intelligence taking away every single job, or the fact that the technology itself is not necessarily trustworthy, or what do you worry about? And what should decision makers, especially in organizations, how should they understand some of those concerns? And what do you think are ways that we can actually mitigate some of those concerns?
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm a techno optimist. I'm an engineer, a die-hard mechanical engineer. I even did my PhD on diesel engine, what have you. But I have seen how much problems that we already solved with technology, and I'm quite a firm believer that it's also possible now to solve these technology, to solve most of the problems. I don't see it any other way because we're not going to use less of all these products. So I don't think degrowth would help us. It's good to strive for less growth or whatever, but it's not going to happen. Don't shoot the messenger. So we have to innovate ourselves out of trouble. And now we need the AI in order to do so. But if you look at the history, most of the problems, if not all, have in the end been solved by technology, which always created a new problem that we always had to attack again with technology. So fossil fuels are now bad. Yes, they are, but they saved the trees. We almost had no forest anymore. And luckily, we found the fossil fuels, and we were so proud of that one. Then we found out, there's a problem with fossil fuels as well. Okay, solve that one. Now we have the electric vehicles. They have some problems. They're much minor. Okay, solve that one. That's what we constantly have to do in the future. And what you see with every technology had always the shadow side. So fire was good for us in a multitude of applications, but you could also burn your fingers or your house. So we had to regulate fire and to control the fire. With a lot of regulation on that one, we managed to control the fire quite well. With acceptances, but okay, we're still all right. The two differences, it was with nuclear, with bricks. You can build houses within, you can smash someone's face. We used gazillion more bricks to build houses than smash faces, so we kind of regulated that. The number one difference with artificial intelligence is that it comes much faster than fire, so we have to be quick to get used to it, and it can also improve itself. Like a nuclear weapon cannot actually invent a new nuclear weapon, and that's with AI, of course, this self-strengthening effect. So we have to be quick. We probably will be a little late. I hope we're not too late. It is dangerous fire we're playing with, because if there's a certain thing, as I said, in order to come to traffic, you already have to flexibly interpret the rules. If we allow machines to flexibly interpret the rules, and they're a gazillion times far smarter than we are, it comes with kind of a bit of danger. So am I concerned? I still am optimistic that the benefits will be bigger, but we have to regulate.
Do you have what you think of as some of the guardrails or some of the rules? Are there Carlo's laws for AI, just like Andrew Kay has laws to govern robotics? So there, if you could wave your magic wand, are there specific things you would want to make sure that since we're playing with fire, we can make sure we don't get burned?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we in the European, we have the AI Act. That's where we Europeans are very quite good at to regulate. But in this case, I also work a little bit on the AI regulation. And what it does quite sensibly is that it first makes a differentiation on what kind of AI, how critical it is. So try to first identify which you want to regulate and which you don't want to regulate. And you can have a lot of discussions on that one. It says actually that in the most critical thing, you also have to explain what the algorithms are doing, which actually, by the definition I used in the beginning, makes it not really AI anymore. It kills AI in the most critical things. And the rules we had already, Asimov, who had his rules, that's already 70, 80 years ago, that he came up with his robotic rules that the robots, it's quite similar to what Andra Kay actually presented, is first try not to kill or harm somebody, and the second is listen to the human beings, that they still carry the most responsibility in the end, unless it conflicts with the first one, and then the third, take care of yourself, etc. And we have to think further on. The difficult thing, to my point of view, is that as I see it, that we have to get some kind of universal agreement on some moral ethics, and we have to intertwine them by basic in these machines. And so that these machines in due course I don't think they get consciousness, could be, but in due course, that whatever how smart they are, they live to these quite a fundamental rules. They do not know where these rules come from, but they kind of sense that it works better when they follow these rules. This has a very nice link to how we as human beings relate to religious rules. The 10 commandments, they came from a story from some gods that we never met, etc. But we found out that if we live to them, life is pretty stable. That means that if we manage to do so, because we have to do it on a universal scale, that these machines hopefully will follow these rules. They don't know where they come from. So we are kind of the gods of these machines then in due course. And then just hope that they will be God-fearing creatures.
So help me communicate their frame for organizational decision makers, people who lead. What do you think the average person in an organization or in a government, how do they get smart about this stuff? What should they be focusing on? How should they be thinking about the uses of the tools in their own work, in their own lives? Because the technologies are going to keep on moving at this very, very rapid pace. Are there any insights that we can offer them to be able to help them to feel that they can keep up?
Yeah. What I've often sensed talking to all kind of organizations, and I'm a little bit surprised because of course I'm working in that field, is that they don't experiment a lot with these machines. Most have Copilot installs in a limited way, and most know ChatGPT. I always challenge them to play as much as possible with all these tools, to start experimenting, to set some guidelines, but to at least stimulate people to start thinking about it, because it's often starts landing as soon as they start playing with it and realizing what the potential is about that. And a lot of people, because the examples of what can go wrong are also quite clear. So you have to set a little bit of rules. Do not share all the information of a company with all these kind of tools. So it has to be a little bit common sense also to apply with it. But start kind of use it as a coach. Use it as a lot of people do as a sparring partner to get you going. Ask the thing to do your work for you, and if probably the result is not that impressive, but at least it got you rolling and this kind of stuff. Use it as an intern. So that's the kind of stuff that and then often people start playing around with these tools, and these days every week a new tool comes up that will actually surprise you, and you can play around with it. And then you can also even ask ChatGPT or whatever kind of tool, or Gemini or Claude, to ask them how your work can be helped with AI. It will come up with an idea as well. So this is a new situation where actually also the differentiation between people and the people that you will look for is going to change. I don't know if you heard last week, the CEO of Shopify, and if you heard of that one, he actually said, okay, if we had a new hire, just to get people thinking, probably, he did some explanation afterwards. It was a little bit rude how it sounded. But if you want me to hire another person, first prove that it cannot be done with AI. And if you really have a good proof, we might hire somebody, but first prove to me. And that's kind of rude, but it got me thinking as well. That might be a good example how to work with that one, because it sets actually already people thinking, oh, okay, what kind of things is left over for me in the future.
Absolutely. But I think what's important is that the tools can actually help us with that process, right? Is that you want to understand your own skills, you want to understand the ways you can create value, you need to leverage the tools yourself to be able to continually develop the skills so you can provide that value, especially for the kinds of work roles that you're talking about where we color outside the lines, right?
Yeah.
Now, we started talking about education, especially the gentle disagreement you and your wife had about the use of the tools in the classroom. How would you help parents to understand the uses of the tools? How would they, again, they're moving so rapidly. Should they think about the ways that their kids are using the tools and the ways that they can be leveraging the tools potentially to be better parents?
How to be better parent? That's good. So my children are so a little bit older and using all these tools already in their study, etc. making them massively more effective as well. So I thought to give them some tips. I don't know if you know the Notebook LM.
Yeah.
A Google tool. Use it to make a podcast out of big papers, so that you first hear what it's about, and that's a nice gimmick. So I said, "Hey, if you want to study and you have a new report, try this one." And they said, "Yeah, duh. I always use this paper. I first put it there, put my earplugs in, go to the gym, and afterwards I've got the point, and I can study a little bit." Oh, you're already there. So that's already what they apply. Their learning is so massively. I think we can really squeeze the university into it's small. The learning is really, really massively changing. We see that at the university as well. The one direction learning is already being taken over completely by the internet, and we are doing more project work, more challenge based education, this kind of stuff. That's what it's changed to. When people ask you, well, yeah, what should I ask? What should my child study? And also might say, what should I study? So yeah, it's not the programming so much anymore. Although you need the architects in software development, you really need them again. But I'd say, okay, do something that they like, they get some energy from, and make sure they finish it. That's what I always say. I'm not such a fan of dropouts, etc. But also in resumes, when I hire people, I first see if they at least finish something, finish it and show dedication, etc. That's what people were looking for. And in the end, you will do a job that is totally different as what you study anyhow. How these parents should educate them with all these tooling. Yeah, again, I kind of enjoy my children making maximum use of that. Their work is so much bigger than mine world was. And the good thing about some people, what I also see is that intelligence on itself will be a commodity. The intelligence, you had these big differences in IQ, which was actually also a passport to prosperity. If your IQ was high, I think that there's a huge effort now thinking that if you can also have AI as a tool, then IQ will be much less important. It's the EQ, what to do with all this kind of information, that's going to be important. Just that when you dig holes, digging holes, you need a very strong guy with big muscles or to dig holes. That's the best one. If you look who's the best bulldozer driver, now that we have technology of bulldozers, that's a totally different person. So these big muscles, still nice to look at, but they're not very important for digging holes anymore. And it's the same with probably the IQ. That's going to be less important. And the EQ is going to be much more important. So try to stimulate people to talk more to other people, and where the things that challenge your EQ rather than your IQ, it's going to be less important.
Yeah. So with an emotional quotient, social emotional learning, all those skills, the social skills, there's no question that those will continue to be superpowers for humans. So we've focused on a very sort of near term future. I want to just wrap with asking you to think a little farther down the road. So Carlo wakes up, it's Saturday or Sunday morning. It's 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road. What are you doing in a day, and how does AI show up in that day?
Oh, that's cool. I think what AI is already doing is that it made everything that you do rather frictionless. But there's one constant, actually, that is how we are evolutionary tuned. That doesn't really change so much. So we still are hardwired with our reptile brains, That, for instance, then I can predict that as well. Go back to my mobility specialism. What you see is actually that we are evolutionary programmed to be mobile for 1 hour and 15 minutes per day. That was the evolutionary optimum. So we had to leave our caves in order to get food. It doesn't automatically run into our cave. So we had to get out to hunt and gather. But walking around all day was not a sensible way to use your energy. So the evolutionary optimum was 1 hour and 50 minutes. And what you see now, although we don't have to get out for our food anymore, this mobility, which was just a means for a purpose, for the hunting and gathering, became a purpose on its own. People, wherever you measure on Earth, even if the food comes running in your thing like the pandemic, they want to be mobile for 1 hour and 50 minutes. In 2045, I will be mobile for 1 hour and 50 minutes. I will be 1 to 1.5 hour, again, very similarly, using to get food, to cook, to eat, to be with friends, etc. That's also a constant. So we can have now these food replacement drinks in 1 minute. Good for some people, but most people really want to spend time on the food thing. That's 1.5 hour. Then 2 hours of communication, that's also in our hardwired brains, and about 5 hours of cognitive work and 7 hours of sleep, and the rest probably we will enjoy ourselves. The thing with AI that makes all this kind of stuff much more frictionless. So this biological constant that we still, how we live our lives is not going to change so much, but it will be much more pleasant because, yeah, here's still the techno optimist. It's going to be better. We're going to be more prosperous because of the productivity that's going to be helped. And all these less favorable jobs, they will be done by machines.
Thank you for leaving us on such a positive note, Carlo. It's been a masterclass for me. I've learned a ton of your perspective about the use of these tools, and I hope people will check you out online and learn more about your work.
Please do so. I will share. I also start sharing all these new tools that I find. Maybe it can help some other people also to start experimenting, and that's the positive vibe you want to do, because then you automatically will see what the power of these tools is, and conclude that it will make your life better as well.
Tremendous. And by the way, now that we know how to manage the hours of our day, because you've given us the roadmap. So
it is a biological constant that we have to actually acknowledge.
Wonderful. Carlo, thank you so much. Be well.
Thank you.